Okay, so everyone all set? Candidates? Okay, shall we begin?
Sure.
All right, so first of all, if anyone would like to use the restrooms, they're just out the door and to the left. And there's also water fountains out there as well. I'd like to just welcome everyone to Edgewood High School and this candidate forum for Wisconsin Governor. My name is Wade Delagrana, and I'm a social studies teacher here at Edgewood High School. And it's important to note that today's forum is being sponsored by the American Political Systems classes at Edgewood. And it is a semester-long elective course that focuses on the midterm elections. This forum was organized by and will be conducted and run by the students taking this course. All 6 candidates that are on the Wisconsin ballot have been invited to attend today's forum. And for the record, the Evers campaign sent their regrets as the candidate had a previous commitment this afternoon, and they did offer to send a surrogate in the candidate's place. The Walker campaign did not respond, and just a few hours ago, Maggie Turnbull, the independent candidate running for governor, informed us that she's stranded on the West Coast with flight delays and won't be able to return to Madison until tomorrow. The format of the debate or the forum is as follows. After the introduction of the candidates for governor, there will be an opening statement from each candidate, followed by a series of questions that have been prepared and presented by a student panel. After the panel questions, we will transition into general audience questions. And if you prefer to put your question on a note card, there'll be a couple of students that will be passing out note cards and pens or pencils, or you can come up and take the mic and ask your question then. A reminder to all candidates, please keep your responses to under 2 minutes, so we'll have time for the questions from the students and from the audience. With that then, let's turn it over to the students who will conduct introductions of the candidates.
Although Dr. Maggie Turnbull is unable to be here today, we would like to share a little bit about her background. Dr. Turnbull is running for governor as an independent. She is a Wisconsin native from her hometown of Antigo, Wisconsin. She majored in astronomy at the University of Wisconsin and earned her doctorate in astrobiology from the University of Arizona. Dr. Turnbull has dedicated her life to cataloging potentially habitable planets and searching for extraterrestrial life, work for which she is internationally renowned. She has served 4 years on the Antigo City Council, where she began the Antigo Farmers Market, and is now looking to expand her political influence as governor.
Hi everyone, I'd like to introduce Phil Anderson. Phil Anderson is the Libertarian candidate for governor of Wisconsin. Phil Anderson, he's a graduate of UW-Madison and is the current chair of the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin. He is also a veteran in the U.S. Army and served as a combat medic in a Patriot Missile Battalion in West Germany. In 2016, he was a candidate for Wisconsin's U.S. Senate as a Libertarian. Please welcome Phil Anderson.
Hi, I'm introducing Michael White. Michael White is the Green Party candidate. He is from Medorno, Wisconsin, and he runs a private practice in La Crosse, and his candidate for lieutenant governor is Tiffany Anderson. Please welcome Michael White.
Hi, I'll be introducing Arnie Enns. He is from Appleton, Wisconsin, where he is a software engineer and owns a technology consulting business. He has a degree in political science and computer science from UW-Oshkosh and a master's degree from the University of St. Thomas in software engineering. Enns founded the Wisconsin Party and is running as the candidate from the Wisconsin Party. Now, the Green Party candidate had something else to add.
I'm going to ask Wade to come up. I warned you I was going to have you come up. This is brief.
This wasn't on the script.
This is not on the script. They weren't planning on this. So, I live out in the country. I grew up in Detroit, but I live out in the country. I raise chickens and bees. So I have farm fresh, free ranging, organic, whatever buzzwords you want, eggs for you guys. Deb, would you give these to Miles? So these are just my gifts for people that made this. I'm sorry I didn't know how many students would be here, and I don't have that many chickens. I don't have, okay? But as a gesture of appreciation and camaraderie for my partners, I just wanted to bring along a little treat from Western Wisconsin. We can move on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Faye Darga, and I am currently a junior at Edgewood High School. Again, on behalf of the Edgewood High School American Political Systems class, I would like to welcome you and thank you for being here today. So our first question to start us off will be phrased as an opening statement. Most people in the audience, or for that matter in Wisconsin, don't know a lot about the three of you or your platform and party. So my question to each of you is, why did you decide to run for governor as a third-party candidate against such surmountable odds? And if you could each limit your response times to 2 to 3 minutes, that would be very much appreciated.
I'm not exactly sure who's supposed to go first, so
Go right to left.
so I will. First of all, thanks to Dr. White for the eggs. I love grass-fed eggs. I used to have chickens myself in Fitchburg, and I would appreciate it if Madison would reduce their restrictions on people being able to raise chickens in the city of Madison. I'm running for governor of Wisconsin as a libertarian. I got involved in politics because I realized a number of years ago that the two-party system is not only broken, but it doesn't really represent individual people anymore. There's a fundamental problem with an individual's relationship to government. In the Declaration of Independence, it states that rights belong to people and people delegate those rights in order to be governed. And I think that a lot of us still believe that. But both in Madison and Washington, that is no longer the case. We are no longer represented. Those representatives are bought and paid for. It's all a money laundering scheme, more or less, for Republicans and Democrats. And if you are paying close attention to what's going on in both places, they're not even writing the bills. They're not even half the time looking at the bills that they're passing on behalf of their corporate sponsors. So that's a fundamental problem for me, and I think for most people in the United States, and if they become aware of it. The Libertarian Party is a natural home for that sentiment because we've stood for individual rights since the beginning. You originally knew libertarians as classical liberals of the 18th century, Thomas Jefferson going back to Thomas Locke even in the late 17th century. We stand for the ideas that are represented in the Declaration of Independence, and that people are created equal and they have inalienable rights. Now that philosophy permeates every stand that we have in our campaign and in our party. In particular, our campaign stands for local control. That's one of the things that I'll do as governor. I will fight for every department of the state government. We'll have a close look at it. If it can be moved to a lower level of government, it will be. If it can be disposed of altogether because it's just a political way to pass money on the donors, it will be disposed of. We want to bring government back to the local level, back to people, because that's where it's most appropriate, that's where it's most transparent, accountable, and efficient, and inexpensive. That's a big thing. Another thing that we will do, if elected, is dispose with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, which is the instrument of crony capitalism on behalf of the Walker administration, much like the Department of Commerce was for the Doyle administration. Republicans and Democrats always find a way to reward people who funnel money into their campaigns and into their parties. We will end that. And last of all, we want to get rid of the state income tax because that is the fuel for that crony capitalism. 7 states currently don't have state income taxes, and they still have roads and schools, but what they have is more accountability in terms of where taxation goes and how it's spent. And I think as residents of Wisconsin, we deserve all of those things, and that's why I'm running for governor.
I'm Michael White. I'm the Green Party candidate for governor. If you haven't noticed, I came with props. So the first prop I have is them. This is a book that just came out by a sitting senator from Nebraska. He's a Republican. That's okay, I forgive him. The title is Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal. I'm running for 2 main reasons. One reason is climate change is real, it is accelerating, it is a disaster unfolding in front of our eyes. We have 10 to 15 years to turn this around. By 2040, 60 to 70% of the coral reefs on this planet will be dead. If we don't change something, within 20 years after that, all of them will be. Ocean life is dying. Insect life is dying around the planet, and we're not doing anything about it. The second reason I'm running is that I've become convinced that the 2 major parties are so busy beating each other about the head that they're not focusing on the issue. We need to get corporate money out of politics. We need to get the power in politics back to the people and back to the next generation. I want to thank the the school, the class, and the students for organizing this, because this is your future we're talking about, and it's really exciting to see you getting engaged in your future. There's a whole raft of additional issues that I would like to talk about given time, but that's it. Number one, bring civility back to politics, find a way to work on the issues. Number two, work on climate change and the accelerating natural disaster that's in front of us. Thank you.
Good job. Made up for the time that Phil went over, but that's
Whoa.
okay.
How much? What do I owe you?
45 seconds.
Okay, 45 seconds extra.
So I'm Arnie Enns, and I have this vehicle that I'm in the process of creating called the Wisconsin Party. And real quick, what I'm trying to do is reform our government so we can transform our society, right? Because our government creates and codifies the rules and how we all live together. And we have to take back our government so it represents us as people, and we can use that as a vehicle by which we can transform ourselves and our society. Because if we don't, we're going down the road that I am in complete agreement with Dr. White, that we're facing existential crises with our environment, with our sustainability, with our economic systems. We don't talk about them in public. So it was a week ago last Monday, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, released a study that said we got 10 years, not 15 years, not 20 years, not 30 years. It's now that we have to start making changes in how we treat each other and how we live in concert with each other, or else the Earth isn't going to be able to support humanity, especially as we're going from 7.6 billion people today to approximately 10 billion people by 2050. So I want to talk about these things, and our current political system doesn't. Our current news cycles don't support it, and I think we, the people, have to lead rather than rely on our leaders to lead us, because they're not going to. They're part of this kind of corrupt system that we have. So real quick, because I think I only got about 30 seconds left for the introduction, we'll get into this with the issues. What I want the Wisconsin Party to be is three simple things. It's take back your government. You do that through reforming our electoral systems and getting the corruption out of our government. The second thing is to leave it better than you found it. It's a simple concept, and we don't do a very good job of it. We live for short-term returns, not for the long-term best interest. The third thing is be kind, which also echoes what Dr. White was saying, that we need to put the civility back into our conversations, get the personal attacks out of our political system, talk about issues, realize we're all on the same page, and we don't have to fight each other like the current two-party system makes us think we have to disagree and hate each other with this divisiveness and this polarization. We'll get into a lot more of this, I'm sure, as the questions come up. But again, I'm Arnie Enns. I'm a software guy. I'm not a politician. I don't want to be doing this, but I feel I have to, because we have to do more than what we've been doing, and our current system is failing us. And it is about the Wisconsin Party. More to come on November 7th with that. Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to transition to questions from our student panel. And so I think, Tommy, you're first.
Hi, I'm Tommy Bauer. I'm a senior grade at Edgewood High School. My question is about the... Oh, sorry about that.
Hold it up a little closer.
Is this better? Good? Okay. Hi, I'm Tommy Bauer. I'm a senior here at Edgewood High School. My question is about the Democratic surrogate, the Tony Evers campaign. So, as Mr. Dalgrano previously mentioned, all 6 candidates for governor were invited to this forum. As you know, Scott Walker did not respond, but Tony Evers did. His campaign responded in the sense that they wanted to send a surrogate here to debate and talk to the public about his view and his campaign, what he stood for. Now, some of you were rather hesitant and reluctant to bring that surrogate here, while others were not. So, can you please tell us your position and why you did or did not support the surrogate? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, we'll go back and forth. We got that email last week about potentially having somebody from the Evers campaign come here. I, for one, I'm all for it because it's fine. It's good to have other voices heard. But part of it, too, is that I don't like the fact that Tony Evers won't want to come and talk with us, or Scott Walker, because I think they compete in the realm of raising money, and there are differences between the two parties, but they don't want to talk about the things I think more people want to talk about our system and about our challenges that we face. And to me, it's fine that they're not here, because it'd be somebody that would be towing that line, And if Evers came, it'd give a lot more press coverage to it. And it's great that Wade and you guys and the students here have been able to put this on, because it's super to have some of the news coverage that we're able to get out of this event. But whether Evers is here or Walker is here, I don't think it really matters all that much. If they were here, I'd be willing to talk with them, but they're really not going to do anything except keep things within the narrow, defined issues that they want to talk about. I don't think they really want to talk about what climate change really means, and that what it really means is we have to ask ourselves really hard questions, like what it means to have degrowth within our society, what it means not to have positive GDP growth all the time, rather than saying about how you split the pie up, that we have to keep on growing the pie. There's limits to growth, and I'm going to stop now because some of these guys can talk about that.
So my response is off the cuff, because I don't remember what I said in the email, frankly, but I like the question. There's no such thing as a bad question, because you are students. These are audience questions. These are not professional media people. There's no bad questions. My response off the cuff is that, okay, we're happy to have somebody come. We're happy to have you guys come, but we're not invited to your debates, and you're only going to send a surrogate? What kind of message does that send to the students that you're not important enough that they want to send a real person? So I'd be happy to have his views and Governor Walker's represented here, because we are all part of the same team. Ultimately, I'm retired military. I did 5 years in the Navy, 15 in the Air Force. I serve on a local public land use commission. I believe in duty and civic duty, and I believe in participating, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing. And they're telling us you're not important enough for them to actually come. You don't have a checkbook, and you don't get enough media attention. We're here because we want to engage in a civil debate.
I agree with Dr. White. I do remember how I responded to that email, and that was, a surrogate's not good enough. And part of it was for the same sentiments that Dr. White mentioned. You all deserve better than to have a surrogate sent. And I've been places where Mandela Barnes has been there speaking for Tony Evers, and when it gets to the hard questions, he just defers. There's not really a substantive answer to questions that are really challenging. And furthermore, it was a strategic move. We hope that by saying no to a surrogate, which was over a week ago, I believe, or about a week ago, that we would put pressure on them for Dr. Evers to actually come. And he didn't. He chose not to, for probably the reasons that Dr. White mentioned, and that is that this is not a place where he's going to get enough attention, and because both, on behalf of Walker and Evers, there's no tangible benefit for their campaigns to be here. And all there is an opportunity for them to look bad in the face of hard questions from students and citizens and people who have real ideas and real solutions to problems. We won't play the game of hate and calling names like you probably saw if you watched the debate on Friday night. We won't play those games, and therefore there's nothing for them to gain for being here.
Hi, I'm Delaney Bontock, and I'm a senior. My question is on funding for K-12 education. Republican candidate Scott Walker and Democratic candidate Tony Evers have both presented themselves as champions for the cause of K-12 education. Governor Walker has called himself the education governor, and Mr. Evers has served as the state superintendent of public instruction for the past 9 years. Mr. Evers released his plan to restore state funding to 2/3 of the total cost of public schools, and Governor Walker recently announced that he would match that commitment. Do you support raising public school funding to this level? And if not, what is your proposed budget for education, and how would you fix the current issues with our school system?
There's a lot to answer there. I'll try and squeeze it into 2 minutes. I would not support increasing funding for K-12 because in every case across the nation, it's shown that by and large, spending more money doesn't create more results. Wisconsin has a serious problem with education, especially in the numbers that show, it just came out again recently, we have the worst results, black versus white kids in the country. And that's a shame. And the current governor and the current superintendent of public instruction, both candidates who aren't here tonight to hear this wonderful question that they'd have a hard time answering, are responsible for that problem. Our solution is to empower parents to teach kids how they see fit. And while not abandoning the idea and the funding of public schools, we've proposed something called universal open enrollment, which allows people to take the money that they're currently assessed if they open enroll to another district, which is often sometime between $1,800 and $2,500 a year, and spend that money how they choose, either in another public school, a private school, or homeschooling, whatever they want. Now that might sound like a voucher system, but it's different from what Governor Walker has in place because his system promotes Common Core standards from the federal level, which we don't really want to have our kids suffering through. It promotes teaching to testing, programming kids to be docile, reliable employers for 21st century, employees for 21st century employers. We want kids to have the freedom to learn, to become more manifested, more present, more solid citizens, to get a full education. And the only way they can do that is if parents are given control again of their education through breaking the monopoly of public schools.
Great, 1:30.
So okay, I'm back on schedule already?
You are.
All right,
You're good in my book, Phil.
So there are a lot of things up here that you're going to hear the three of us agree on. And one of the things that was frustrating in the first forum is how much we agreed, because people wanted us to fight more. We agree on a lot of things, but I don't agree with him on this. It starts with enough dollars to support the school system. In the town that I live in, we just recently went through an evolution about closing 2 elementary schools, moving the 2 elementary schools to a single campus, and there was a lot of discussion about funding what was needed, and there weren't enough dollars. So as Green Party governor, I would start by ensuring that there was a minimum available everywhere. And in some places you need more than, I'm losing my identity, some places you need more than the minimum because there are greater challenges in some places than others. And we need to restore a minimum amount of facilities and teachers and class size everywhere. After that, I would get involved in getting the teachers involved. There's reasons in some communities where the parents aren't involved in the schools, their jobs don't allow them time to do it, etc. So I'm also against voucher systems. Now he says that his is not a voucher system, so I'm going to be unfair and label it as one. And the reason is that, yes, I really want to give every parent a choice. Your kid can go anywhere you want to, and there will be enough funding. But when everybody flees the public schools can't turn anybody away. And some of the students and problems that they have to deal with are relatively more resource intensive. And when you let everybody cherry pick the good students, the ones that are not struggling, the ones that have a stable home life and everything else, then the public schools have to deal with the infrastructure that they have to keep up in case people come back. They have to deal with all the problem children. They have to deal with all the handicaps, with all the other things that the public schools have to provide. So I'm against that system because it hurts the system that brings us together as a community and supports our future. And I'll try not to knock myself over again.
It's all good. I'm the timekeeper here too. So let me reset this. It's kind of like my campaign. I'm the candidate. I'm the webmaster. I'm the copy creator. I'm the secretary. I'm doing it all. It's great. So I can timekeep while we have a forum. Questions about schools and education. And a lot of that will fall down this line of funding and not good enough. Is that better?
That's better.
All right. I did this last time. We talk about issues within the system that's currently established. What I would do as governor is I'd establish a blue ribbon commission to ask ourselves what we want out of our educational system. Because right now it's failing us. It's not just a matter of how we spend our money and whether it's private school, public school, or a voucher system. It's the very nature of it. And again, I want to reform things. I want to reform our government, and part of that is reforming our school system. Our educational system is originally modeled underneath a Prussian system that we imported in the 1850s. It's all about obedience, and it's all about conformity to follow rules. And it produced great resources, I guess, for the Industrial Revolution. Here, follow my directions, do this thing day after day after day after day. Be obedient, right? But today our economy's changed. We're not an industrial-based society. We're a new age kind of an economy, and there's so much more that we have to demand of our citizenry. It's not just to serve a workforce. It's also, what do we want as citizens as far as our realization of ourselves? And that I think we should try to self-actualize more. We should demand the best of ourselves and have our system support that. And that means a lifelong educational system. So I'd, again, go back, establish a blue ribbon commission to say, what are the best educational systems in the world? How do they work? What can we take and apply here within Wisconsin? And how can we, within our system, school, and how it works, go after what are called the 4 C's, right? The first one is critical thinking. We're not raised to be critical thinkers. Next one is collaboration. In the new world, you have to collaborate a lot more. It's not about individuals just doing their own thing. It's about communication. Communication is about, I don't know, over already? All right. And the last one would be creativity. Anyways, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jesse Giroux, and I am a senior at Edgewood, and my question is in regards to Foxconn. With Foxconn receiving many environmental exemptions in the deal signed by Governor Walker, Wisconsinites have voiced their concerns about the environmental impact Foxconn possesses, especially since the DNR was under audit in 2016 for a drop in enforcement of municipal and industrial permits. A major manufacturing facility like Foxconn shows many environmental challenges from the way they will handle chemicals to the impact of the surrounding watershed and the water levels of Lake Michigan. What is your cost-benefit analysis of Foxconn? And if elected governor, what are your plans to ensure the DNR will regulate Foxconn to ensure the protection of the environment?
All right, 2 minutes. So you're more concerned about the environmental aspect of it or the total package and the subsidies and the like?
More like the environmental.
The environmental aspect. I don't think we should do Foxconn. I think what's going to happen with that, and I'd love to find a way to kill it and not move ahead with these large investments of concentrated industrial manufacturing, because it's never proven to be good for us in the long run. It's a large multinational corporation that wants to use our resources, and then they want to privatize the benefits from it, but they'll end up publicizing or externalizing the cost from it. When invariably technology shifts and LCDs go the way of tube TVs, we'll use some other devices for input-output. I'm a technology guy, right? So this stuff evolves really quickly. We're going to build this massive plant, and we're going to open up our resources and say, use all the water you want, when we got to protect our Great Lakes water system. It's one of the greatest assets of this state. And we are going to have a lot of other people coming and knocking on the door with it. We got to be very judicious in how we allocate the resources of our natural resources. So I'm all about that environmental stuff with it. Real quick though, the other thing that I think is insane is that it's $4.5 billion that we're going to give for a subsidy to Foxconn, right? In total, by the time you count all the credits and everything. So you do the math on that, 4.5 billion divided by 72 counties is $62 million per county. So stay with me a little bit here, see I have 30 seconds. If you're gonna bet on stuff, do you wanna make one big bet, one chip, you're gonna go to the roulette wheel and put it all on, you know, number 6, and hope it pays off? Or do you wanna spread everything around and say, hey, all counties, here's $62 million to spend for the next 10 years in order to grow businesses locally that are Wisconsin-based, that are sustainable, that fit in the model of a new economy. I know which one I'd want to do, but I don't think that Scott Walker or even Tony Evers are going to do what I would like to do to shut down that, and I'm over already.
Darn it. So we're going to go him or me? What's the sequence?
Go to you.
Okay. So I have a very checkered history. I served in the Navy, finished in the Navy, went back to grad school, spent 2 years in grad school, then worked in the Air Force. In the Navy, I was exposed to water contamination problems in Pennsylvania where there were real problems with the aquifer with dry cleaning solvent showing up in the water. In the graduate school years, how many people have heard of Agent Orange? Right? And it's bad. The chemical involved is dioxin. I worked with pure dioxin for 2 years. And polychlorinated biphenyls and polybrominated biphenyls. There was a massive spill in Michigan in the late 70s where that stuff got into cattle feed and tens of thousands of cattle died. We then learned that the chemicals were showing up in human tissue. 80% of the PCBs ever produced, by the way, they've now been banned, are still in existence, but we're finding high levels in the blubber and kidneys and reproductive organs of whales, and whale populations are dying. This stuff is out in the Pacific Ocean in high levels, in toxic levels, and we haven't disposed of the stuff we have. Coming back to Foxconn, we had to give them a pollution waiver, but that's okay, because it's all going to go to Chicago, which is downstream, and who cares about Chicago, right? I would have absolutely vetoed it on the grounds that what we find with these chemicals, if there are downstream consequences, and the more we look, the worse they are. And so on that grounds alone, I would have vetoed it, but I totally agree with what are we doing giving away big tax cuts for big companies for jobs that might come someday and for temporary jobs? If we're going to give tax cuts or tax breaks, let's do it for something which sustains our economy long term. And I'm on.
Yeah, I agree with both Arnie and Dr. White. Thank you for highlighting the math. That's usually a topic that I have to bring up, and you did it for me, and I appreciate that very much. I also agree with Dr. White's environmental analysis, and I didn't know about whale blubber, so I'll make sure I'll steer clear of that in my diet. But I want to point out one more thing that's important to the environmental issue, and that is that along with this massive amount of money that we're all spending to import a company that has an atrocious record dealing with municipalities, dealing with employees, has suicide nets around it in some facilities in Southeast Asia, is the exception that is given to the legal system. The Foxconn has the right built into their contract that anytime they get sued by somebody locally, that automatically goes to the state Supreme Court. And currently the state Supreme Court is dominated by people that Scott Walker has appointed or the Republicans have elected. So it really removes any chance for, if there are environmental issues and the people that live in, around southeastern Wisconsin and want to appeal that, hey, they've broken the law, they're not following the rules, blah, 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 aside from all the other things like eminent domain and those things that they're doing, but environmental things in particular, that it will go directly to a court that we don't have access to except through a long, arduous process that they'll have access to right away, and that will be friendly to their existence in Wisconsin. So it's really set up. You can almost see, if the people involved had mustaches, you can almost see them twirling them as they design this Machiavellian scheme to create this campaign thing that's turned backwards on the Walker campaign, because people have woken up to it earlier than they planned that we would. But we're awake to it. And all of us up here agree it's got to stop, and I think a lot of people in Wisconsin, as they wake up to the full atrocity that this project is, will be behind us as well.
Hello, my name is Phoebe McIntosh, and I'm a junior at Edgewood, and my question is about the legalization of marijuana. Currently, recreational marijuana and marijuana for medical use is legal in several states and in recent years, Canada. Although it is not currently legal in Wisconsin for either use, the question about legalization is on Dane County's advisory referendum on November 6th. If you were to be elected governor, would you support the legalization of marijuana to be sold and regulated in the same manner as alcohol for those over 21?
Yes, I would. We've been fighting the war on drugs for how many years? Has it worked? We have one of the highest rates of incarceration of our black citizens in the country. An awful lot of them are going to jail on nonviolent possession crimes. That's number one. The previous system doesn't work. It turns out that we've been waging a war on cigarettes, and that's working, which is why you see vaping. Because they can't sell cigarettes as effectively anymore. They're trying to get people hooked on nicotine by another measure. So legalization, regulation, and taxation would put money into our coffers for education and all the other things. It would get our police no longer involved in chasing simple drug-related things. And I'm not talking about hard drugs. For the record, a family member of mine, who shall go unnamed, is a heroin addict. When I was in medical school, I was mugged and pistol whipped on the streets of Detroit. I am familiar with inner city crime, inner city poverty, and a lot of things that drive it, one of which is poverty drives drugs, drugs drives poverty. So if we can take that element out of the equation, I would do it forthrightly.
Yeah, I'd legalize it, and I would tax it, and I would do very little to try to regulate marijuana. To me, it's a plant that grows, it's a weed, therefore it's called weed. It's like, and it has a lot of great properties. I myself have smoked, I still smoke on occasion. And I know I might be the only candidate that will admit to that, but I don't think there's a problem with marijuana. But it goes beyond that too. I would actually like to talk about legalizing other kinds of drugs. And the way they treat the ills of our society and drug abuse is to realize that people suffer. There's this really great doctor out in Vancouver named Gabor Mate, okay? Phenomenal. Look him up on YouTube, watch some of his stuff. The reason that people use drugs or alcohol or have addictions is because they suffer. And we live in a society where we all suffer in ways that are unnatural to us. We have to address root causes and things. Again, I'm a systems guy, I'm a software guy. What's the underlying root cause of issues? People take drugs because they're in pain, because they suffer, because they want to get the neurotransmitters released in their brain that they can't get through their life as they lead it today. So to make drugs illegal is a way to reinforce our limitations on a kind of a corporate world where the only things that should be legal and available are things that corporations can control and make money off of. Right? So marijuana got made criminal back in the 30s, I believe, and that was because alcohol was back in vogue. Prohibition was up, they can make money off of that. Also, the oil industry wanted to make synthetic ropes and to make synthetic products. So hemp, well, that's got to go. You know, it's a natural thing that grows 10 times faster than bamboo. And it's great for a lot of different resources, but the system as it is, if the people can find plenitude in the world around them, well, then you're not being a good capitalist, you're not making any money, you know? So you want to take those things away systemically and make people, you know, get into petrochemicals and be a good consumer. We're all good consumers. And that's part of the thing. I'm over 2 minutes. I'll stop.
Well, I agree with these gentlemen except for Dr. White's desire to tax it. I think we'll save plenty of money if we legalize marijuana in incarceration, which you mentioned, and we can use those funds in more effective ways than the state government. Marijuana is a huge issue, not only because people should be free to live their life as they choose, as long as they're not harming somebody else, and certainly smoking marijuana falls into that category, for economic reasons, and that we have a tremendous potential in Wisconsin for hemp, medicinal marijuana, marijuana products, CBD, etc., which would be a boon to our economy, and not only because veterans are begging for access to medicinal marijuana and recreational marijuana, and these are people that we've sent to battle under somewhat specious conditions in places maybe that we shouldn't be in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they come back injured and mentally ill, and then we send them to a Veterans Administration hospital system that historically overprescribes opioids, and then when it's time for them to get off it, they have to go on the black market and find you know, illegal fentanyl and things like that. That's the situation we created for veterans, and we can solve it by legalizing recreational marijuana and medicinal. And not last of all, because of criminal justice, and that was mentioned as well. That's an entry into a massive criminal justice reform that would include getting rid of mandatory minimum sentencing, reinstating jury nullification. I, as governor, if I'm elected, day one, I start signing pardons of people that are in jail for nonviolent drug crimes until I'm done. Day one until I'm done, until they're all out. We expunge those crimes from the records so they can have access to jobs and better education. And finally, people that are in jail should have the right to vote unless they've created voter fraud. But really the end result of why this is a problem in the first place is because of follow the money. 61% of the last Marquette poll favored legal marijuana. Most Republicans favor legal marijuana. Why is it having such a hard time getting through our state assembly when bills sponsored by Democrats don't even get out of committee? Because there's a lot of money behind keeping it illegal. A lot of money. Big pharma, big energy, big paper in Wisconsin. They don't want it legal, and that's why you see idiotic comments from our current governor and the Republican candidate for United States Senator, like marijuana is more addictive than meth. And they call CBD oil marijuana juice. That is all signaling to corporate masters, not based in reality, and it's time that we talk about marijuana in realistic ways.
Hi, I'm Jack Parkos. I'm a junior at Edgewood High School. All right, so this forum obviously is being held in a high school full of high schoolers, and we've had to see our fellow high schoolers throughout the country experience school shootings, such as Stoneman Douglas in Parkland. So I think a question obviously arises, what do we do regarding these school shootings? Are we going to look into more school safety, like arming teachers, putting armed security, or do we look into gun control measures, or like a combination? So as governor, what would you do to protect schools?
Well, certainly gun control doesn't work because a lot of the places where these shootings have happened have had so-called gun control, and one of the murder capital of the country is Chicago, Illinois, which has relatively strict gun laws. Clearly they don't work in the same way that other prohibitions, marijuana, alcohol, when that was the case, anytime you took the law, tries to prohibit something, people still have access to it, and nowadays you can buy a 3D printer and print your own handgun if you want to. That is not a way to stop it by trying to control people's access to guns, and it's not a moral way to stop it because people have the right to defend themselves, their home and their property and their family in these situations. As regards to schools in specific, I have no problem if schools choose to. Schools should have the right to choose whether they want to protect their kids with armed guards or with armed teachers or whatever. I don't know what the best solution is for every community. That should be decided at the community level because obviously every community is different. But the idea that we have a public education system that requires that all these kids that don't carry guns gather in one place every day on a predictable schedule, and that then our media, when things do happen, sensationalizes way beyond, you know, I mean, they're tragic events certainly, but we spend days and days arguing about things like this. It makes it an attractive target. So we need to do something to protect anyone, whether it's at a concert or in a government building or whatever it is. But I think those decisions are best left to the localities involved, but with respect to the fact that people do have the right to lawfully bear arms and defend themselves in any situation.
Yeah, you're great. I'll try to keep this more simple. I get carried away because I have so much passion about this stuff. Gun control is something that I think we have enough rules on the books. We just need to enforce them with stuff. Again, a root cause thing, look at the larger problem. It's our culture with things. We have a gun culture. We don't necessarily have a problem with having hunting guns or pistols and the like. I have a hunting family, everybody hunts. I don't, but it's great. You're not gonna take those things away from people. And I don't think anybody's suggesting that. But we should enforce the laws that we have in our books right now about background checks and the like. We should eliminate loopholes around people being able to acquire things at gun shows. And we should almost, I feel, treat guns like we treat cars. If we go to the trouble of having to register to have a car, we should register to have a gun. If you have to pass driving tests to drive a car, you should have to pass the test to own a gun. It's pretty straightforward. But I think, again, the larger issue that we have is that we sensationalize stuff like school shootings. It's a horrible thing that should happen, but on average in the United States, about 100 people a day die from gun deaths. 60 of those are from suicide. The rest of them, the vast majority, are crimes where somebody knows the person that they're killing with a gun. So we make a big deal, and I'm not trivializing it, but very few people die from random attacks from strangers with guns or in mass shootings. Yes, it does happen. Yes, it's pathetic that it happens. It should happen. And to address that is more of a societal thing. We have to get away from this gun culture that we have where it's not about hunting anymore. So much of gun culture now is about paramilitary stuff. If you go into a bookstore or you look at a magazine rack, it's not Field and Stream. It's all these things. It's like AR-15, it's arm yourself. It's all these different things. And to me, that's weird that we have these weapons of mass destruction that we glorify as a lifestyle. And that's more than just gun control. And I'm at 2 minutes, so thank you.
There should be no more children dying from automatic weapons, period. Now, I own guns, including an AR-15, and I was trained in the military on how to use them, but they are entirely too available. Our current system doesn't work. You can find instructions on the internet on how to build your own with no serial numbers that's not traceable. I'm not sure I know exactly what the solution is, and we're not going to get rid of the Second Amendment anytime soon. But I also don't believe that the Second Amendment writers had automatic weapons in mind when they wrote it. So I would, as governor, I would make the governor's office a bully pulpit. Let me make one thing clear. The governor does not write laws. She or he can use the office as a forum to put issues on the plate and hold the police, the communities, and the legislators accountable for solving a problem. And our leadership has failed to do that. So I don't know that I know precisely the answer, but I would start by making it impossible to buy guns without a background check. I would start by making it impossible to order guns to be shipped to you over through the mail, through various ways, without a background check. I would enforce the laws that we have, and then I would get people smarter than me on that subject and ask how to address it.
Hi, we're going to go over there now. Yeah, I'm Gabe Brito. I'm a junior, and my question is about roads. And According to the Marquette University Law School poll, 64% of people will describe the roads in their area as poor or just fair. Obviously, the gas tax has been brought up as a way to fix this, but what measure would you take to fix our roads?
All right, I'm going to go first this time. So budget stuff with roads and infrastructure. I've covered this in some other presentations, and yeah, we should take care of the infrastructure that we have today, and we should pay for it out of our current revenue streams. Right now, we're kicking the can down the road, and I know a lot of politicians use these kinds of phrases like kick the can. Kicks the can anymore. But anyways, we don't deal with today's problems with today's dollars. We play budget tricks within our current government system, and we should pay for what we use today out of our current budget. So I would look at doing things like raising the gas tax or other means, like Evers gets lambasted by Walker for, but you have to pay for what you use today out of your own budget. That's what most people try to do, and that's what we all should do as far as our government and our different jurisdictions. But on the other hand, I don't think we should be building massive infrastructure projects. We should repair what we have, make it really reliable, and we have to rethink what our infrastructure needs should be to think 20, 30, 40 years out. Because cars and the way they work and our dependency on petrochemicals and our highway system are fundamentally unsustainable unless we get nuclear fission going or some such thing. And we'll come to realize that in time, but if we don't start planning to build and live in tomorrow's world, then we're gonna burn through all of our inheritance, and we're gonna spend money in excess on our roads and our infrastructure. And I'd like to put money into research or other ways to think about how to have common infrastructure. There's some stuff on my website about it. I'll get you guys that a little bit later on the presentation and closing statements. Thank you.
So where I live in La Crosse County, we got a questionnaire in the mail from the county board because there's an advisory referendum where I live also, and they gave us three choices. One, a tourist tax. Tax products and services that tourists will pay as they come in because that's what's damaging our roads, right? It's too many tourists. Okay. Number two, raise the gas tax. Number three, borrow money. None of those three sound like perfect solutions by themselves. First, I would work on making sure that we take care of our infrastructure, starting with our roads and our bridges, at a rate that is better than the rate at which they're deteriorating. We need to budget for it. I would like to keep within our current budget if we can. If we can't, then we either have to raise taxes or borrow money or cut somewhere else. And the devil's going to be in the details. Because I am not a Democrat and not a Republican, I am not tied, and none of the three of us are. There's a lot of things we agree on, and one of them is that each of us would work with the existing parties that are there. I know a lot of nice guys that love Donald Trump. I know a lot of nice guys that regret voting for him. I know a lot of people that voted for anybody but Hillary. I know a lot of people that are avid Democrats. My own daughter yelled at me, well, yelled is too strong a word, but she was very angry over me the last election because she felt that we cost Hillary the election. That's another conversation. We didn't. But we need to have a civil conversation. Every one of those people that disagrees with us violently is an American citizen, and there's a reason that we are having these disagreements, and that's part of what we need to fix. So I would work with all of the parties involved at the county level, the state level, and the legislative level to find a solution, and I would keep hammering until we got there. And I'm done.
Thanks for the good question. I think this is one that's not really ideologically driven, but is the answer is more about good government and transparency and cost accounting. We know that the Wisconsin DOT is particularly badly run and has been full of corruption since at least the Tommy Thompson administration. Just recently, about 2 weeks ago, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel published an article that they found that the WIS DOT was paying twice for some parts of Milwaukee area road projects, just paying twice. And they knew it wasn't an accident; it had happened multiple times. And keep in mind that there's a contractor somewhere that's receiving double payments for that as well. I've made a commitment as governor to not speak with lobbyists at all during my administration. I think that lobbies for the Wisconsin Construction Group and the road builders are a big part of the problem, in that that's the way that a lot of corruption gets rewarded, how favors are handed back to people for contracts through double payments and things like that. And that's certainly a way that we can cut back on all of the actual cost of building roads. It's hidden in this monstrous DOT budget that doesn't really reflect what it takes to build and to maintain roads. Secondly, our goal is to push as much road administration as possible down to the local level so that it's more transparent. That there's probably not much initially because the Wisconsin DOT runs most of the roads in the state. But we do need to get to true cost accounting, get local units of government involved, and look at the real costs. And if it means that we need to keep the gas tax as it is, if it means that because there are more electric vehicles on the road that we need to look at things like tolling or other ways that they contribute to the maintenance of the roads, I'm totally open to that as long as it's based on full cost accounting and getting rid of the bureaucratic, corrupt mess that is the Wisconsin DOT.
My name is Anna Reed, and I am a junior at Edgewood High School. My question is on lowering the voting age. In the wake of the Parkland, Florida school shootings, young students had shown themselves to be politically engaged and eloquent. They care about the issues and are affected by the laws, yet critics argue that they are easily influenced by their parents and the media, and are not mature enough to vote. What is your stance on lowering the voting age to 16?
Wow, I don't think I've gotten that question before. Have you guys got that question before? It's a fantastic question, though. Thank you for that. To begin with, I think the idea of voting age for anything is sort of skewed. The idea that you can serve in the military with your parents' consent at 17, of your own volition at 18, drive at 16, you can't consume alcohol until you're 21, is all completely out of whack. And it doesn't bear any resemblance to the actual maturity of the person involved, because obviously that's all across the board. There are 16-year-olds that maybe shouldn't vote. There are 18-year-olds. There are 30-year-olds that probably shouldn't vote because they are not being responsible with that right and responsibility. I don't have any problem with lowering that age to 16 as long as we're taking a comprehensive look at all of the age limits for things and making them coherent so that if somebody's going to be an adult and vote, be an adult and drive, be an adult and serve in the military with a weapon in their hands, as Dr. White and I both have done, that we're making responsible decisions and not, making decisions about drinking age based on federal highway funds, which is why Wisconsin is 21 now. I'd be happy to look at that. I'm not opposed to it at all philosophically, but I think that we need to get a coherent system in place where we're recognizing adulthood at an age that makes sense across all of these different rights and responsibilities.
Sure. All right. Well, this is really easy. It's a great question, and it's come up once before with people I've talked with. I would be fine with having it be 16. I agree, though, with Phil in that it should be normalized across all of our society right now. We have different ages for different things. You guys just heard Phil's response. Mine's pretty much the exact same one, and I would agree 16. For a lot of kids, you're an adult and you think critically, especially if we can reform our school system so that we do develop those kind of critical thinking skills. It'd be great to have more participation. And down the line, the same sort of thing with our parole system. Everybody should have a right to vote, and that's one of the things that's gotten removed as part of our criminal justice system. And I oftentimes question where the justice is in that criminal justice system, where people are punished a long time after they serve their time. So we should look at that end to end across our whole society and voting rights. And to extend that just a little bit, we should have automatic voter registration, I believe. When you register to get a license or when you get a car registration, you should automatically be enrolled to vote as well. And we should get more people to participate in our democracy, not less.
I really hate it when people ask really good questions that I don't have a pat answer to. So my answer is, I don't know yet. I haven't thought about it. It's a good question. I'm going to give a slightly nuanced answer, however, so that off the cuff, I'm a little hesitant. We know from biology, psychology, fairly well done studies that not all functions develop at the same rate, and they're not all developed by the time we're 18 or 19 or even 21. We also know that in many ways, young ladies develop faster than young men. So maybe the right answer is I'll let women vote at 16 and men at 18. And it sounds like a flip answer, but there's actually some biological support for that. I also know that when the drinking age was lowered from 21 to 18, fatal automobile accidents went up. And I also know that in some places where when they raised the drinking age back up, they went down again. So it's not that simple. But I agree with both of my colleagues, friends, candidates, whatever we are.
Eggs, we're friends.
Yeah, we're eggs. We didn't add salt together. That's an Islamic thing, but that's okay. But I agree with them that we have inconsistent standards in our society. And I've been overseas where we handed people a gun under conditions that I was not totally comfortable with. And that we ask too much of our young men and our young women. And we need to be more careful with that. I also agree with restoring the right to vote. I would remove as many impediments as I can to voting. I think it's inappropriate. Okay, if somebody gets locked up for felony fraud, in many states they lose their right to vote permanently. That's wrong. And I would restore as much right to vote as I can, just like him. And I would also make voting easy, make registration easy. We need more voters. Anybody in this room that's over 18, you all better vote, here?
My name is Natalie Melms. I'm a senior. So, as you know, there was a debate for Governor Walker and Dr. Evers on Friday night. No third-party candidate in the state of Wisconsin was invited to this, as none of you are polling high enough. How do you reach the Wisconsin voter, as you are not allowed to participate in these debates?
I'll lead off with that one. It's really hard, right? It's hard to get media attention as a third-party candidate, and I'm not spending any money. These guys are barely spending any money. But our politics shouldn't be about money. Politics should be about people having a free exchange of ideas. It shouldn't be about the money that's influencing our system through marketing, public relations, and advertising. Because so many people get an emotional response from how the system currently works. That's why they don't want to engage in the realm of ideas. Because they can't beat third-party candidates in the realm of ideas. They can kick our butt in the realms of money, but they can't do it in the realms of ideas. So I really think that we're hamstrung by that. That's why a venue like this is awesome, but we have to do more. And what I'm trying to do, that's what the Wisconsin Party really is. It's not really a party, it's a vehicle for transformation. Back in the day, when the Turners were happening in Milwaukee and there was the socialist mayor of Milwaukee, people had social clubs. It wasn't just about what member of a party you're in, it's about integrating communities and lives. And it was entertainment, it was music, it was your local sports teams, you lived in community, and you talked about issues that affected your community together. And that's what I want to try to reinstill after the election cycle. Part of why I'm running for governor is to have a platform to talk about how we can transform our society. Because if we don't use our government to reform ourselves, we can't really fix these underlying issues that we have and to transform our society. So I think the money corrupts that. So I want people to do it of their own free will, of their own volition. You got to believe in this stuff if you want to make a difference. It can't be about chasing the buck. It can't be about your short-term interests. It's got to be about you leaving things better than you found it. That's the Wisconsin Party platform, right? It's take back your government, leave it better than you found it, and be kind. And there's simple universal ideals that we should get back to. And I don't think money helps sell that. I think we just have to do it ourselves.
So the Green Party, how am I reaching out to voters? Badly, ineffectively, not enough. Specifically because we don't take any big money and we don't have much money. And a good part, so of the signatures required to get on the ballot for statewide level, it's 2,000 signatures. We got on the order of 2,600, of which about 2,100 were accepted by the Elections Commission when we went through. I got over 600 of those myself. Went out knocking on doors, in parks, etc. I have no experience doing this, so I'm learning the hard way and making a heck of a lot of mistakes along the way. How do you tell a really smart man? He goes and finds some smarter young women who knows more about it than he does. And that's what I've finally done if I've asked for help. And they're not all women. I'll stop with the sexist jokes. But the reality is that I went out and reached out to young people that are Green Party members and asked them for help. And I didn't do it early enough or often enough, and I didn't get enough help. But we're doing it with no money. And that is a real challenge. Now, if we're going to blame anybody. I like playing the blame game once in a while. I like to blame drug companies. I'm a doctor, and we'll talk about drug costs later. And when it comes to politics, I blame corporations and the media. Specifically, how much free publicity did Donald Trump get from the media that brought him so everybody knew who he was before the first primary happened? One of the estimates is over $10 million. I'll take some of that. The media, especially national media, failed to do their job of informing the public about what the alternative viewpoints were. Now, I think we got to be fair to them that if we're not raising any money, not getting any attention, where do you draw the line? I'm not sure where that line is, but we are deprived of the ability to put our voice out there for people, and that is a real problem. So how we are doing it now is internet, a web page, some phone calls. We don't have a big campaign organization, and I'm going to do better next time.
Well, I'd like to answer that question. Echo a little bit the negative sentiments you heard from Arnie and Dr. White, but also propose something positive as well. As you know, you may know, I organized a protest on all of our behalf at the debate Friday night. We got some news coverage out of that, which was very thankful for. We had a lot of people show up and protest on our behalf, and even the people that were there on behalf of Tony Evers and Scott Walker generally acknowledged that they think that all the voices should have been heard at the debate, even though their campaigns didn't allow that. And as we know, the newspaper industry is dying. Mainstream media in itself is getting lower and lower ratings, and more people like you and like us are getting our news and our information from other sources. It's a lot less controlled by big dollars, and where more people have access to it. So our concentration has been not through trying to save up a ton of money and run television or radio ads, but running Google ads and YouTube ads and using social media. And that's how we've gotten to a polling number that, while it's not high enough for their artificially high standards to get to the debate, it is enough where we're polling at the top line of the Marquette poll. We're getting some national coverage in terms of where our polling numbers are, and our polling numbers are staying steady. And I expect that when the next and last Marquette poll comes out, because of our hard work and because of people that are honestly trying to find the truth about their politics, that we'll do even better. And that's, we have to claw and scratch and fight our way, but thankfully, things are changing over time, not fast enough for this election cycle, unfortunately, but they are changing, and people do realize that they're not being given all the information, that the choice between Democrat and Republican is a false one. It's perpetuated by the media at the behest of the two-party system and their corporate sponsors, but gradually people are breaking through that. How am I doing on time?
You have 10 seconds now.
I want to point out as an answer to the last question that both the Libertarian Party, the National and the State Party, allow people to join at any age and can vote. So that addresses the voting age question. We believe that everyone should vote in our political parties. Thank you.
Our last question from our student panelists, and then we'll go to the audience.
Hi, my name is Frankie Mashapito, and I just wanted to ask you guys about global climate change concerns. In consideration with the free pass for Foxconn on environmental regulations and Trump pulling our country out of the Paris Climate Agreement, what are your views on the issue of climate change? Do you believe the scientific evidence supporting it, and if so, what would you do to reduce Wisconsin's impact on global warming?
All right, well, I'll go first. This is not a question that traditionally gets asked of libertarians. People have these misconceptions about libertarians that we're Republicans that like to smoke pot, or we're ex-hippies or something like that. We have real answers based on real philosophy for every question that comes in front of us, in particular this one. We have a profound respect and agree that one of good government's responsibilities is protection of private property rights. So one of the aspects of the Foxconn deal in particular, but even at a forum that we all spoke at, that we all went to, and Tony Evers and Scott Walker were at the Menominee Indian Reservation earlier this year, in the state of Michigan, there's a mine that's been given a permit to exist that will pollute the Menominee River and thereby pollute some people's property in northeastern Wisconsin. And the question was, what should anyone do? And the counties have taken referenda and passed resolutions to support fighting this pollution on their land. And the basic answer to that question is, if we just had a government that supported private property rights and would, on behalf of those citizens, sue the state of Michigan, then we could dispose of that project altogether, even though it's not happening in our own state, just by defending the property rights. Similarly, at Foxconn, not only are there pollution issues, but there are eminent domain issues and all kinds of different issues where the Foxconn has accessed the force of government to take away people's private property rights. And if a person has the right to own property and dispose of that property as they see fit and live on it as they bought it, then Foxconn wouldn't exist, this mine in northeastern Wisconsin wouldn't exist, and we'd have a way that small but principled government could help people fight pollution, fight global climate change. To answer your question, I believe it's real. I think it's so complicated, we're not sure all the factors involved, and I don't think any of the scientists really say, exactly. We know humans are involved, human activity is involved, certainly, but it's a complicated problem. But if we just stick to enforcing private property rights in a real way, not just government playing favorites for big donors, but enforcing the rights of the little people, property owners, homeowners, then we can go a long way to solving that problem.
This is, again, a question that comes up all the time, and it's stuff that's part of the whole reason I'm doing what I'm doing is that it's not just climate change, right? There's the Resilience Center in Stockholm, Sweden, has 9 different markers for global sustainability. The Earth is a system, it has a carrying capacity. It's the number of people you can support, it's the biodiversity richness it can support, and we're exceeding it. So the Research Center in Stockholm has 9 markers, we've passed 4 of them. Climate change in the form of gas emissions and warming of our atmosphere is but one. The other ones are landform transformation, phosphorus and nitrogen runoff into our system, and lack of species diversity. And you can deny climate change all you want. There's still 3 other ones, and there's more happening all the time. As I mentioned in my opening, the IPCC from the UN said that their original projections are wrong. Things are happening faster. So how do you address that, right? I mean, that's the question over time, I think, that we don't spend enough on in our society. It requires all of our help, all of our sacrifices. So as governor, again, you can't change our economy as governor. You can't pass laws yourself. But again, it's a pulpit from which you can talk about stuff. We have to talk about making radical changes to ourselves. I don't think radical is a bad word. The root of it from Latin means root. So you have to go to the root of our problems. The root of our problems are consumption and our materialism and a constant growth economic model that is not sustainable. Constant growth eventually runs up against the limits of growth, at which time the system falls apart. Our system will fall apart if we don't change how we behave, all of us as a society. And as a governor, I want to use that as that platform to talk about these things. There's a lot of ideas like degrowth, where we intentionally tax things differently, where we encourage reusability of things. There's a whole bunch of other items, and I'll talk more about this in my closing because I'm running out of time, but to me it's the most important issue of our age, and we have to make it the focus of everything that we do as a society.
Thank you for asking a really wonderful question, and I promise I won't take more than 20 minutes. So, climate change and environmental destruction is the #1 part of my platform because it is so overwhelming and it's really scary. And the answers are not going to be simple. They are complex. The scientists are in only 98% agreement. There's 2% that don't agree. There is no doubt in my mind and in the mind of most scientists working on it that humans are the cause. And then after that it gets complicated. So the first answer is it gets complicated. But the question is, what can the governor do? What can the governor do about a problem that is worldwide? Well, the answer is we've got to stop waiting for our leaders in Washington. So I have a message for Donald Trump, for our Congress, our Senate, for Mr. Walker and Tony Evers. Your end of the boat is sinking. And I don't want you to take the rest of us down with you. So we change the conversation. As governor, I would work with the other states that are already promising to live up with the Paris Climate Accords. I would put science back. What is it Mr. Walker said? Well, I'm not a scientist. Okay, how does that mean does that mean you get a pass and you get to ignore science? I would put science and the data back on the state web pages. I would make the government transparent. I would start talking about the unexpected consequences of everything we do. And I would be honest with everybody, it's going to get very difficult. Yes, it's going to cost us a lot of money. Yes, it will hurt our businesses. It will hurt our businesses more when Miami goes away, when New York City goes away, when we have 500-year storms happening every other year. The storm with my namesake Hurricane Michael became a Category 4 extremely quickly because the ocean temperature is a lot higher than it used to be. I'm going to stop there because I'm out of time.
So, thank you so much. We're going to now transition to audience for about 10 minutes before we go to closing statements. So if anyone has a question from the audience, we'll just pass around the mic and you can make your question, comment, etc.
And please do.
Just stand up and just state your name.
Hi, I'm Elliot Stockwell, and I'm a senior here at Edgewood High School. And my question is about the prison system. So a recent article from The Economist about the prison system in Wisconsin cited statistics stating that 1/3 of those on parole in Milwaukee would go back inside at some point, and that 3,000 people in the state are put back in prison every year despite not committing any new crime, which is much higher than the national average. The roughly 35,000 strong prison population forces each Wisconsin taxpayer to pay $150. And with an aging population within those prisons, this number is expected to grow. My question is, do you feel that the Wisconsin prison system is flawed, and how would you propose fixing it?
Phil's reaching already, so.
Yeah, I love this. I hate the fact that you have to ask this question. It's a great question. We need to reform all aspects of our criminal injustice system. Right now, it's basically a tool of somebody, and I won't name any names, to keep people locked up, keep them not voting, keep them out of the economy. It's racist in intent, I believe, and it's racist in the way it plays out. We have to reform, and as I mentioned this in the question about marijuana legalization, every aspect of criminal justice, but parole is an important part. People should be allowed to vote when they're in prison and immediately when they get out, even if they're a felon. And they should have their records expunged so they have an opportunity to get back into the economy and get back into school and to get back supporting their families. I think Dr. White mentioned that as well. And right now we've got a system where it's so easy for somebody who's out to just get caught on some little thing, like they're in a house with somebody who's the police are looking for. There's so many little ticky-tack reasons that people that are out trying to change their lives for the better get put back in and get recycled into that system that just creates hardened criminals over and over again. We need to have a system that keeps people that are violent away from people that they would be hurting. But other than that, we need to, as much as possible, keep people as part of the economy, back with their families, back in school, back on the job, and that not only is more just, but creates better economic outcomes for the entire state economy.
So to keep this short, I think we'll all just kind of keep it more to a minute or so to go through the rest of the questions.
Oh, really?
Executive decision. I agree with what Phil said to a large degree. We've all talked about prison reform a little bit through the course of the forum today. 100% wholeheartedly agree that we need to deal with our criminal injustice system. That's what Phil had said, and I agree that's a great way to describe it. We have about 4.25% of the global population, but 25% of the global prison population. Keeping a guy in prison right now in the state of Wisconsin costs on the order of about $80,000 a year. To put people in jail for $80 grand a year for small, non-violent crimes is ridiculous. We have to put people back in the community and reform our communities from the inside out. And it's about helping people. It's not about punishing people. A lot of people are in prison, going back to the drug reference, for petty crimes related to possession or small deals related to drugs. Again, drugs are a thing that people take in order to minimize their suffering, especially people living with PTSD in communities of color where they are literally living a shell-shocked life. We have to have empathy for these kind of people. We have to do more to help them help themselves. And locking them up in prison destroys families, destroys communities, and it's not helping society overall. So the numbers you pointed out are awesome. We should, Phil talked about, Dr. White have talked about, reduce our prison population and do everything we can to help people rather than to punish people.
I'm going to keep it really short. I agree with both of them, and I'm very much against privatizing prisons. When do we want to give people a profit incentive for not taking care of, not reforming, not educating, and not treating well the people they're responsible for? I would get rid of private prisons.
Other questions before we go to closing? Anyone?
I'm a strong believer in the separation of church and state. So the number one issue in Wisconsin, I would say, is abortion. For example, the Democratic candidate Kelda Roy suggested if she was governor, she would pardon doctors in Wisconsin if the Roe versus Wade decision is overturned, that she would pardon doctors who gave abortions. So where do you stand on that and overall on the abortion issue?
Abortion is never an easy issue, and I think every abortion is a tragedy, but it is not the privilege of a bunch of old men in a room to decide what women will or will not do with their bodies. That's unacceptable. So I support abortion rights. I support, even more importantly, making information on contraception available to people. There are some places in the state of Wisconsin where it's hard for women to get accurate information. I wish it wasn't the hot button issue that is. I totally support separation of church and state. I think that abortion is one of those, there's not a simple one size fits all. We need to resolve that and let some people get over it and get past that issue. I would support abortion rights. I would not support limiting them further, and I would dramatically increase public health spending to prevent the kinds of problems that lead to abortions in the first place. And the last thing I would do is address drug costs, and I'm going to stop.
Well, I agree and disagree with Dr. White. I think abortion is a tragedy. It's a terrible thing, but not because, not only because it's a tragedy to the woman, but because a human life is lost. And while I am a religious person, my opinion about abortion is not based on religion. It's medically, physiologically, ontologically demonstrable that that's a human being in there. And while it's extremely unfortunate that an abortion might have to, that somebody's faced with that decision with an unwanted pregnancy, the fact is, if we go down the road of deciding, whether some person is a human being or not based on certain characteristics, where they are, how far they are along in the pregnancy, what their condition is, how smart they are, how able they are to feel pain, etc., we open up a Pandora's box of things that can happen to people that are already outside of the womb. And for those reasons, I'm pro-life. It has nothing to do with religion. I agree with your sentiment that religion and state should be separate, but that doesn't inform my position on abortion.
Hot button item, for sure. I support women's rights 100% to choose what to do with their bodies. And it's not that I'm not pro-life, it's that there's a lot of mitigating things that can happen, that the only people that should have a seat at the table when you're talking about healthcare should be the patient and the doctor. You shouldn't have the state in there saying what you can and can't do around different circumstances, because there's so many different variables, it's ridiculous. I think no woman goes in to a doctor's office wanting to have an abortion. Life's and the circumstances can be tragic oftentimes, and it makes for very difficult decisions. I fully support, like I said, women's right to choose and for determining their own health care. And along with what Dr. White said, I also agree that we should fully fund stuff like Planned Parenthood, because if you don't want to have abortions, you should allow people to be educated about sexuality and help them do family planning of their own accord.
Thank you. For the sake of time, I think we're going to transition to Delaney for the closing statement, but if anyone else has any questions, I think the candidates will probably stick around after to entertain questions that are left unasked. All right, so Delaney?
As a closing statement, what overall message would you like to give the Wisconsin voter 16 days before the election?
We're at a crossroads, and it's not a choice between Republicans and Democrats. It's really a choice between love and hate. And right now our politics is about divisiveness, and we see the other as something to fear. But when you look into the eyes of your neighbor or somebody you've never met before, you have to find the commonality there. You have to find the love there. Our political process is based upon emotions and instilling fear, because it's such a powerful way to get people to act and behave. And we have to reject that. We have to reject the politics of fear, and we have to start accepting and working towards love and how we treat each other. I know it sounds corny a little bit, but it's really not. I mean, if we don't learn to love each other, it's game over, I mean, we're gonna run out of resources, the planet's gonna come back and bite us in the butt, we're gonna end up hating each other, and we just get in a downward spiral. You have to make choices. And it's not just about me. I'm not going to win on November 6th. I hold no delusions. But November 7th, come and check me out, okay? Because it's not about me. I'm running as governor, but we have to take back our society. We have to do it through organizing this, not just politically, it's societally. So, and thanks, by the way, Wade, for having us, and all you guys, great questions. Can't thank you enough for hosting this. It's invaluable.
I'm going to echo his thanks, and I want to thank especially the people who showed up. I want you to notice what happened today. People asked substantive questions, and you got meaningful answers and not pat answers. Sometimes the answer, especially in my case, is I don't know. So, closing statement, what do I want people to know? Well, I'm going to tell you first about the most recent recount that we had, because there's an outcome of the recount paid for by the Jill Stein campaign that y'all don't know about. And it's why you should consider voting green. It didn't change the election. We knew that it wouldn't, but we learned some things. Number one, did you know that an entire class of voting machines has been decertified in Wisconsin because there are problems with that class of voting machines, and that class of voting machines has been illegal in California for a long time. Because of the recount paid for by the Stein campaign. By the way, she got $3.5 million for her whole presidential campaign from donations. In 2 weeks, she raised $7 million for that recount because people were concerned about the electoral process. As a result of what we learned, the Wisconsin Election Commission very quietly put a new policy in place within the last month. This November, 5% of all the precincts randomly will have a hand count, not a recount, a hand count done to validate what the machines tell them before the election is certified. That didn't happen because of the Republicans or the Democrats. That was the result of Jill Stein's courage and Green Party volunteers that were involved in raising the issues. So the reason to consider a third party is that you've been trapped in vote left, vote right. It's one up, down, yes, no. I think our conversations are more nuanced than that, and what people have been doing is they've been voting your fears. Don't vote your fears, vote your future. Seize your government, take your government back, get engaged, try the Green Party, try another solution, because it is time for a change. We are running out of time.
I'd like to agree with both of their sentiments about love and hate and the effort that we're all putting out. I'd like you to all turn around and look at that poster back there that describes a crusader. And this might sound a little whatever, but I'd like to consider all of us who are up here, anyone who courageously spends a lot of their own time, money, effort, health, however you want to characterize it, in arduously pursuing this cause that each of us are pursuing separately as crusaders, pursuers and defenders of truth, justice, compassion, community, and partnership. And while we all fight for that, we disagree on some issues. The reason we're all running and not just folding into a Democrat or Republican or just not being involved at all is because we see a need for more truth, justice, compassion, community, and partnership. But I'd like to point out, too, in my campaign in specific, some of the press coverage we're getting is that our current polling is beating the spread between Evers and Walker, and that's something that at some point they're going to have to address. So my campaign is currently, based on the last Marquette polling, getting 5% among likely voters, 7% among registered voters, and up to 12% among independents. So if you really want to send a message to Democrats and Republicans, they need to start taking third parties into account, letting us be at the debate stage, and therefore sending a message to the public that what we say matters, and the efforts that you put forth here today, hosting this fantastic event and coming to join us today, is all meaningful because it really does mean something to the citizens and voters in Wisconsin. That's how you send a message. Vote Libertarian. Tell them that you are, by your vote, that you're not going to give in to the politics of hate or the lesser of two evils, because as we know, cycle after cycle after cycle, if you choose between the lesser of two evils, what do you have left for the next election cycle? The two evils. It's time to change. Thanks for coming today, everyone. Thanks to Wade for putting this together. It was a fantastic event. We'll be around afterwards for questions about streaming. So thank you all very much.
So thank you so much. In closing, I just want to thank Edgewood High School for hosting. I want to thank my wonderful students, both on the panel and those that came this afternoon. Thank you. Members of the public, thank you for attending. Early voting has already started, and hopefully November 6th we'll all get out and express our views. And candidates, thank you again for coming here on Sunday afternoon. I appreciate it.